Now, coming up for you on GB News Breakfast, the Beatles are set to release new music as AI wizardry unites the Fab Four.
It really is superb, that is, and you can find out more about that next on Headline Makers.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And you want us to go through some of today's big headlines now? Is the author and journalist Susan Holder and the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Good morning to you both again. Susan, let's start with a bit of showbiz. Well, it's not just showbiz, it's The Crown.
Well, that's
is returning.
the thing, you see.
Everybody's talking about Lady Diana's performance.
Yes, so basically that is the problem. It's gone showbiz in as much as they're rewriting history, aren't they? Now, I loved The Crown. I watched the first few series. I stopped watching it when it started to get, I felt, into the more modern-day royals, the ones who are alive now, the ones who actually have to, you know, kind of go out in the world and do their jobs, while The Crown actually is rewriting history. Now, I'm a writer, and I've written about real people in my books sometimes. I actually wrote a book that involved Paul McCartney, and I felt so kind of responsible about that. I emailed Paul McCartney to tell him what I'd written about and told him that I'd like done it with respect or whatever, and he replied and said that was all good.
You got Paul McCartney's email address?
Well, I knew somebody who had it, and I sent him an email, and then the next day he replied and said, this sounds fab. But I just felt a responsibility as a writer that I was writing about somebody who was out there in the real world and who lived. And actually, I think you've got to be very careful. And what they've got in the new series coming up, they've obviously got to the Diana point in the story, and they've had her come back as a ghost and stand behind the Queen, played by Imelda Staunton, and the Queen apparently says to her, oh, it's nothing short of a revolution that you've started, and the Princess replies, that was never my intention. Now, did she do that? No, we know she didn't, because Diana did not come back and talk to the Queen as a ghost, and I don't think the Queen stood in the mirror talking to Diana as a ghost. And if we're starting to do things like that, I think we're playing with history, and people will believe, and obviously may not believe that scene, but all the words they put into people's mouths.
It's a drama, it's artistic licence.
Is it artistic licence when we're talking about historical things? I think drama has a very, very useful point of helping us understand the world we're in. I actually wasn't sure about the whole Savile documentary that we were talking about, Steve Coogan, earlier. I did watch it. I actually thought it did have a point. It did have a useful way of getting that story over. It was done very responsibly, I felt. You have to take a line on that, I think.
OK, Andrew, what do you make of this?
I'll tell you what the problem is that you're mixing what's supposed to be a brilliant drama, which is what it is, historical fact with fiction. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing with Paul McCartney and various others, but also Charles Spencer, Diana's brother. And basically, the biggest problem that they have is exactly that. It's a fantastic series, but as soon as you start blurring it, that's when it devalues it. So I'm against it on that sort of principle. I think keep to the actual facts, because the facts are pretty stunning themselves.
Now, that moves us nicely on. Talking about bringing things back to life, the Beatles' new music, Andrew. I'm incredibly excited about this. I heard the original demo tape. It's from the same session as Free as a Bird. I think this is going to be an amazing thing to bring the Beatles back to life. Tell us more.
Absolutely. As you know, I'm a futurist, back to the futurist, so I speak around the world about the joys of artificial intelligence. Beatles get back to the future. So what's happened is they've found this old recording of John Lennon, and they're going to basically take his voice, and it's going to be released next week, and it's going to be the very last single of the Beatles. And what it does, it shows the fantastic use of this sort of technology, where you can recreate and basically enhance those sort of things accordingly.
I think they're using the word artificial intelligence, though, is worrying people, because they're thinking they've recreated John's voice, and that isn't what they've done at all. It's really John Lennon. It was a recording found by his widow, Yoko Ono, and handed on a tape labelled for Paul, to Paul McCartney. And now they've got the technology good enough. I mean, you know, pulling people's voices out on strands isn't a new form of thing in music, but this technology has helped us to get the proper
And you're absolutely right.
quality.
Actually, it was a lot of things. It was Peter Jackson who did that brilliant sort of series where they're recreating, dusting off all these old recordings and enhancing them. So really, really exciting. We're going to see more of this, I can tell you. We're also going to see people being digitally resurrected. There'll be concerts with holograms and various other things.
That's the whole of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Look, we've got some breaking news coming in the past few moments from the UK's FCA, who say we are reviewing how NatWest Group's and Coutts governance systems and controls are working to identify and address any significant shortcomings. This is in response to the Nigel Farage debanking scandal. And Nigel Farage has responded to the FCA's report. It has identified potential regulatory breaches in NatWest's handling of a decision to close the former Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage's accounts. Nigel Farage has said that the report has whitewashed the decision to close his accounts at Coutts Bank and was a very mealy-mouthed approach to this complex issue. So we have our wonderful panel with us now, Andrew Eborn and Susan Holder. What's your response to this? Susan, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, I think previous to this, there hasn't been an awful lot I've agreed with Nigel Farage on, but I think he's actually done the country an amazing service by raising this and getting it the profile it has, because who knew that you could have your bank account taken off you? And so many people, other than Nigel Farage, had it happen to them and didn't want to go public on it because they found it actually quite an embarrassing thing, and because it just looks like you don't have enough money in that particular bank account, or it's something quite shameful, which of course it isn't. It is absolutely outrageous that anyone was ever debanked in this way, and we do need proper regulations. Why on earth it had to be brought up and why on earth they had to be told that, I've no idea. But well done to Nigel Farage for bringing it up.
All credit to Nigel for raising this. I have a Coutts bank account, surprise, surprise, they do great leather goods. How they reacted to it was far too slow. We always say that history repeats itself because we don't learn the lessons from history. So it's been a PR disaster for them. And it's quite right, they've come out with this. I think it's taken a bit too long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading through Nigel Farage's statement now, who says the report is inconclusive and ignores the elephant in the room. He says what matters now is the next steps that the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator of this industry, does about this scandal. I suppose that's where this goes next, isn't it? It's also what happens. How do we stop this from happening again?
And absolutely. And Nigel Farage, luckily for him, had a very good platform on which to raise this and get people. And as soon as he did, you can't find many people who will argue with him on this point. But other people don't have that voice. They don't have that platform. What are they to do? And if your bank just kind of... And nowadays, it's not like you can live on cash. Everything in your life is controlled by the fact that you do need a bank account. It's, in the olden days, quite a lot of people didn't have them. And now that's unthinkable.
Absolutely. And thousands of people came out as a result. And all credit to Nigel for raising that issue.
And the next issue, of course, is the ongoing question around the size of the payout.
Yes, absolutely.
For the departing chief of NatWest, Dame Alison Rose, rumoured to be in the region of 10 or 11 million.
Yes.
I think that's severely in question, though, isn't it, actually? I also think Coutts has done this. I mean, the whole private bank, well, there's not anything very private about how they were doing their dealings, were there? I don't know how they can even call themselves that. They should be had under trade descriptions, really.
Well, we will be reacting to this story throughout the day on GB News. Hopefully we can talk to Nigel Farage a little bit later on. We've only got about 20 seconds left. So, Andrew, do you want to tell us in 20 seconds about bed bugs?
Well, I will. The mum has found bed bugs in a Butlin Skeg nest, which is quite extraordinary. And worst of all, this was actually in a gold apartment, so heaven knows what
was going on in silver,
I've just come back from Cannes, where they had a similar sort of problem. Lots of bed bugs everywhere.
Even in Cannes?
I travel, more platforms than Paddington. It's got to be good. But it's everywhere. It's a big issue. We've got some tips we'll tell you later on.
Maybe if we haven't got time now, I'll come back and tell you some tips to get rid of bed bugs. So stay tuned for top tips.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's all here. Susan and Andrew, really good to see you. Do stay with us.
Welcome back. It's 8:42. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And joining us to go through some of the day's headlines this morning is author and journalist Susan Holder and broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Very good to see you both this morning. And Susan, we wanted to start with you with this story about your dear husband, Noddy Holder, and his battle with cancer of the esophagus.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a breaking story this week, really. 5 years ago, Noddy was diagnosed with esophageal cancer and was given 6 months to live, which, as you can imagine, was terrifying and horrifying. But the good news is we're 5 years later, and he's had a form of chemotherapy that was very targeted, very intense. When he was given it 5 years ago, they told him that it was something that they hadn't really given to anybody his age. He was 72 when he was diagnosed and when they gave it to him. And they never make any promises with any cancer treatment, but he's doing great. And we've decided to talk about it now to raise awareness of esophageal cancer. It's not the same as throat cancer. It's one of the gastric cancers, and it's not something that gets a lot of attention. And we also want to help the Christie with the work they're doing into the amazing treatment that they have.
As a lifelong, fan of Noddy, I mean, first of all, God bless him.
Yeah.
The nation, I'm sure, is sending, that.
I know we've
love.
shocked some people, and it's not what we meant to do, and we don't want to upset anybody. And the same, and also we're very aware that a lot of people are going through all sorts of different things and all sorts of different illnesses, and we don't have the magic answer, but we can say to people, even with a devastating diagnosis like that, there is always hope. You never know. They're bringing on treatments all the time, and this treatment that he had has kept him healthy now for, the last 4.5 years.
And how are you, and how is Noddy? And especially now that you're sharing the story so openly after so long.
It's harder than I thought to talk about, actually.
Of course it is. Of course
Yeah. I kind of thought, oh, this far on, and he's been well for so long.
Now, Dolly.
And I know.
And you are. You're looking well
and it's a difficult one because it takes you back there. And one of the reasons we kept it private was that Noddy wanted to deal with it in his own way, which was to kind of focus and to concentrate. He's done it all with good humour. He's the kind of same naughty, mischievous person he's always been, and he's been through it all like that all the way. But telling other people is one of the hardest things because you see the pain you're causing other people and the worry, and we didn't want to do that, and we don't want to do that now, obviously. He's got a load, and we've had amazing messages, lots of wonderful, wonderful supportive messages. But yeah, so that's why we're kind of doing it now. But we won't kind of, we don't want to keep on talking about it forever. We want to be able to do the work we want to do with the Christie Hospital and raise some kind of funds for the gastric cancer research fund and things like that. But yeah, so it's a weird one.
And you're talking about the first TV interview.
Yeah.
When does that go out? Where can we see it? And what kind of things does Noddy talk about?
Yeah, so he talked on Channel 5 News and on the Alexis Conran show on Channel 5 the other day. There might be other things coming up as well. So he talked about how he kind of faced it, really, and he very honestly, and I was there, so I know it's true, he took that diagnosis on the chin and just went, I've had a great life, I've had a great time. He was worried about me, he was worried about his 3 children, his 2 grandchildren. That was what upset him. But as a kind of person, he just kind of went, well, it is what it is. And at the time when we were told there was nothing they could do, I didn't know what to do. I need a plan. I need to have something that I'm kind of working to, even if they can't give you any particular guarantees or hope. Everyone knows you just need something to be focusing on. He just kind of went, well, it is what it is, but that we were obviously thrown this lifeline.
Oh, Susan, honestly, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
story
you
with
for
us. I know it's
asking.
really difficult. You've been through a lot in the past 5 years, but we're sending all of our love to both of you.
Thank you so much.
And it's incredible that you are now using this experience, this painful experience that you had over the last 5 years to raise awareness.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Anybody in the public eye who can talk about these things, and as Susan said, we've been discussing it, have been getting on fabulously in the green room, but talking about that, because it really just helps others out there.
Yeah.
And it is that message of hope. Because it's
Yes, it is a message of hope, yeah.
But we were talking, the other thing we were talking about, was a perfect link into this, is the perfect pair. Because working on the basis, if Noddy and Susan are perfect pair, this is a little report here, about, they've done a little research, and they say what fish and chips are the #1 in the poll to find terrific twosomes. They've got things like burgers and chips, salt and vinegar, Tom and Jerry. They've even got fries and milkshake. But there's a few which we thought were missing.
Yeah.
Lennon and McCartney didn't even make it.
Bizarre.
What about Dale Boy and Rodders?
Yes, they are there. That's a good one. Yeah, they are there.
Absolutely, you can have a look. Yeah. We've got Ellie and Martin.
Yeah, that might have been, I think that was 51. It only goes up to 50.
It's gotta be good.
But they missed a few comedy ones, I think. They haven't got people like Morecambe and Wise.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's
Laurel
that?
and Hardy aren't there? I mean, I'm showing my age, maybe. Maybe they've asked some very young people who don't know who Laurel and Hardy. But I mean, even the Chuckle Brothers aren't there. I think they've missed a few comedy.
I think that's Sam and Ella. You work on that.
But there's some here that are quite surprising. So the obvious one for me would be tea and biscuits, right?
Absolutely.
That's the most British answer ever.
Yeah,
Number 5. That's quite low down the list.
You think so?
We go together like rabbit, ding dong, or whatever the song
really
is.
do. Well, Susan, Andrew, it's been so good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you especially for sharing that. It was amazing.
Thank you very much. Well, joining us now is Education Secretary Gillian Keegan.
Yeah, she's joining us now live on GB News. Thanks for joining us. And you're the Education Secretary, of course, and a superb initiative you're rolling out today is something we talk about a lot on GB News, and that is the secrecy that often surrounds the sex and education curriculum of children. And there's often a lot of explicit stuff in that, which a lot of people may feel inappropriate, but that's often done in secret. What do you plan to do about that?
Well, there's two things we've done. I've written to all schools and parents as well this week to say that parents must be able to see all materials around relationship, sex and health education. There are no copyright reasons why those materials cannot be shown to parents. I've made that clear to schools, and I've also sent them a pro forma letter that they can send to their providers of these materials in case there's any reason to clear that up. So that's the first thing. The second thing we're doing is we've appointed an independent panel who have been looking at age appropriateness and age limits for each sort of area of sex education that's taught in our schools. So they will be, well, they have already given us some indications, so we're working to update guidance based on their findings, and that will be released before the end of the year.
Well, Ms. Keegan, I've been involved in this myself. I used to teach teenagers about the dangers of pornography addiction in schools. Spoke to about 45,000 across the UK. I noticed something changing in my time, though, and that was this. A lot of activists were getting involved from outside of schools, going into schools, talking about things like LGBTQ, trans stuff, and also quite extreme, sexually explicit material. Is part of the problem the fact that activist teachers are getting in outsiders, your likes of your Stonewalls, your mermaids, and they're getting quite dangerous ideas into young minds? What will you do about that?
Well, these are some of the reports that we've been hearing from the likes of yourself, and there's been some media reports and press reports and paper stories in the paper, etc. And that's why actually we appointed the independent panel. We accepted that we ought to be clearer about what's appropriate to be taught at what age. We've also made it clear that you know, contested views such as, you know, there are lots and lots of genders, etc., that they must not be taught as fact. So we are tightening up the guidance to make sure that it's much clearer that relationship and sex education is age appropriate. It's not based on contested facts, it's based on facts, and that all the materials related to the teaching of children in our school, including in this area, can be shown and should be shown to the parents. It's very important actually that parents are involved and a part of this discussion, because of course children have questions when they get home, and their parents are the primary educators of their children in many ways as well.
OK, Gillian, on a specific point, do you think we should be kicking out trans ideology from British classrooms?
Well, actually, on the specific point, we are going to bring forward gender questioning guidance, which enables teachers and head teachers to navigate what is a sensitive area that we do need to treat sensitively as well. But we will be bringing that guidance out, and I hope that will be out as well. I'm working with the Equalities Minister and looking at what we can do in that space, and we'll be bringing that out for consultation. Hopefully, it'll be out before the end of the year.
No, Ms Keegan, whilst we've got you this morning, I needed to ask you about the shocking news last night from Crispin Blunt, the Tory MP who named himself as the MP who's been arrested in connection with rape. Important to say, he says at this point that he believes this is all going to end without charge. But it does follow the Tory MP, Peter Bone, suspended on Wednesday for 6 weeks for bullying and sexual misconduct against a staff member. There are now a total of 9 Tory MPs who've been embroiled in sexual misconduct claims or allegations, following Chris Pincher as well. I mean, Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street a year ago and promised a government that will lead with integrity. Are you a government of integrity? Because it looks as though you're a party with a sexual misconduct problem.
Absolutely not, and I'm definitely a person of integrity, and we are a party of integrity. And all you can do in these situations, I mean, obviously these are very serious allegations, so the whip has been suspended or removed in some cases as well. All you can do is act swiftly, support the institutions, whether that's involvement from the police or whether that's Parliamentary Standards Committee, support the institutions and make sure that you act quickly. That's all you can do in these situations. But, you know, I've been in Parliament now for 6.5 years, and I will say the vast majority of my colleagues, you see, you know, no signs of this at all. I haven't seen any examples of this. But when they do happen, and they happen on all parties, you know, it's not just one party. There are a number of people who are currently suspended in other parties as well. So it happens with all parties. I will be honest, it's usually male colleagues as opposed to female colleagues. But all you can do is, when it happens, act with integrity, follow the right processes, and make sure you act on the findings of those.
Ms Keegan, another day, another round of terrible headlines on immigration for the Conservative Party, this time on asylum backlogs. Looking back over time, something leaps out, and that is this is the government that's gone very soft on deportation, very soft on refusing asylum. 76% of those who apply are granted asylum. When are you finally going to get tough on immigration?
Well, we have got tough on immigration. We're the people who have introduced new legislation, because obviously you have to have the law behind you. We've also obviously had the Rwanda policy, which is still in the courts, but that is part of the policy. And we've also got returns agreements now with a number of countries, and a new agreement with France as well. We're also looking at alternatives to hotels to bring that bill down to the taxpayer. So we are the ones taking all of the actions, but there is no doubt that this is a huge problem. The numbers are huge. The numbers have been growing. Well, we've actually got a reduction since last year, but you know, this is something that's over the years has become an increasing problem. But the party has put every action in place to try and deal with it. Is the Conservative Party. The party that's blocked every single one of those actions is the Labour Party. So just be very clear on who is getting tough on this.
OK, Ms Keegan. And just finally, GB News Breakfast understands that there have been high-level discussions between government officials and humanitarian charities discussing a plan to host Palestinian refugees. Can you confirm that those conversations have been taking place, and would you support a scheme for Palestinian refugees similar to the scheme that we rolled out for Ukrainians?
No, what we're focused on right now is trying to get that pause so we can get humanitarian aid operationalised, taken to the people who need it, and not put into the wrong hands. Any future decisions on any future schemes would be for the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary.
Gillian Keegan, Education Secretary, very good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
And we're still joined by our panel, Susan. What do you make of what she said? Particularly, I'm interested on your thoughts around sex education in schools, because I saw you there, you know, you were raising your eyebrows. Oftentimes, parents have no idea what their kids are being taught, and oftentimes it's quite X-rated stuff.
I have no idea why you would think that it's not a good idea to include parents in that kind of that part of their education, and that they need to know. But I worked for Childline and the NSPCC for 5 years, going into schools, primary schools, talking to children about all forms of abuse. And sexual abuse is one of the 5 forms that we would talk about. Now, there's nothing explicit in the Childline NSPCC script kind of and work we were given to work with. But we always made it available to the teachers in the schools before. It was all the schools then could, if they wanted to, make it available to parents, and I think most of them did. We never had a problem with parents, but often I would find schools would say, "Oh, we don't want you to talk to them about that." Teachers would ask me to talk about sexual abuse, mentioning the word sex. So how we've gone from that, which we'd always reassure them, we never had an issue. How we've gone from that to now going into more explicit or more dangerous areas of things that aren't really based in fact, I've no idea. It was only a few years ago I was doing that, and actually schools were very, very nervy about Childline going in and talking to children. So how on earth can you get to this point? I don't understand.
And the best education is where parents and schools work together for the education of their children. That has to happen, and as soon as things are kept from parents, that's not good.
But that has changed. That there is very much a kind of environment now of secrecy. There are teachers who see it, I think, as part of their mission to get their ideology into young minds.
And that's very dangerous. We need to make sure, go back to the system where everybody's there for the best interests of the child.
But I do think they've been a bit asleep at the wheel. Were you convinced by Gillian Keegan?
I think she gives a good account of herself, actually. I think she does. I think she does seem to be across a lot of detail. So I find her quite a reassuring presence. The devil is always in the detail, and actions always speak louder than words. But she does give a good account of herself, I do feel.
Andrew, what did you make of that interview?
I thought she did an effing good job, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
But remember that one. The interesting thing, and this is the hot mic moment, no, I think she is very good at getting out there, dealing with your very tough questions. And I thought she gave some credible responses. Right. There are the devil's in the detail, and as you say, there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed accordingly.
All right. Andrew Eborn, Susan Holder, always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you. Super.
Thank you very much, both of you.